the one name that I've started to fall in love with the last couple of weeks, looking at his situation in Toronto, Nick Robertson. I mean, 22 years old, requested a trade earlier this month. He had 27 points in 56 games last season for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he's currently a restricted free agent. It feels like this is probably their best case scenario for filling that top line left wing with a young, talented piece that can not just be part of the team next year, but can be part of the future of this team moving forward.
Yeah, he could be. It's the young piece. It's a good addition to the future of the Penguins if they were to pull something like this off. Kyle Dubas is worried about and focusing on building out that future, building out the prospect pool, building out this team with young faces that can be NHL ready soon or later. And Nicholas Robertson, that's a guy NHL ready now. For how he's, I don't want to say disrespected in Toronto, but for the way that he's kind of been pushed down the depth chart on multiple occasions, I'm shocked he played 56 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now the production doesn't shock me. I think 14 goals, 13 assists for the full 27 is for his situation overachieving almost. Like I said, I'm shocked he played 56 games. So seeing that he got 27 points in that time, usually playing, I believe, depth options, depth roles, that's solid. Let's see what kind of production he could put up in a top six situation, maybe playing alongside Sidney Crosby if deals like that was to get pulled off. Mm-hmm. And made it this far in and not even mentioned the old Kyle Dubas connection. Like there's probably some previous eyes already on Nick Robertson from Kyle Dubas' time there, and also
Wes Clark.
Wes Clark, and I was thinking of Wes Clark. Just that's the big one that I would love to know who was in charge of the draft in 2019 for the Leafs.
Mm-hmm.
Was Wes Clark involved in that? Like, so now that Wes Clark is moved over to the Penguins, does that connection amplify?
Mm-hmm.
It's things to. I'll have to look into that because that adds a huge layer if that is something that the Penguins are looking to do. Mm-hmm. I don't know who could go the other way. I don't know who the Leafs would have interest in because the Penguins aren't going to want to pull from their prospects. The Penguins aren't going to want to pull from their draft picks. And the Leafs are usually tied up against the cap, so I'm assuming they are again right now. It would just depend on who they'd be willing to take because, I mean, they're not going to take a Ryan Graves off our hands. They're not going to take, maybe a Rickard Rakell, but the money change there is too big. So there have to be some sort of, it would have to be a wild deal that is too big brain for me and you to even think of right now.
Here's the thing. I think it's a draft capital trade because the Penguins have acquired some extra draft capital over the next couple of years. Toronto, by the way, has $2.5 million roughly dollars in cap space right now, but this is a team that is looking at Nick Robertson, and he's looking back at them and saying, I don't want to be here. Like, trade me. So there's a little bit of, that leverage that gets taken away from Toronto because everybody's like, well, either trade him or not, but he doesn't want to be there. Like, you can try to mend that fence, but clearly he doesn't want to be there. And if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins, I started this whole thing off saying he's 22 years old. If you trade next year's second round pick for Nick Robertson, all of a sudden you're saying, all right, next year's second round pick is 22 or 23-year-old Nick Robertson. You'll take that. Like, I will take that in exchange. The question becomes, like, once they start asking, all right, well, is he worth a first round pick? No, he's not. He's 22 years old. He has a lot of upside, but this is a guy that, wants out of your organization. I'm not giving you a first round pick for him. He's a restricted free agent too, so you don't have to worry about really the contract going either way because he's definitely going to come in and under that 4.4 that the Penguins have left in their salary cap space. So it just feels like going into August, where last offseason, August was the Erik Karlsson trade. This is clearly nowhere near that, but that feels like outside of the Crosby extension, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes here, that feels like the best possible scenario for the Penguins is they acquire Nick Robertson, they infuse that youth immediately into their top six, and they bring him in and get him a fresh start next to Sidney Crosby.
And that'd be a huge boost to his pedigree. Who knows what kind of future he has. I mean, I think when he came around, I believe there was a lot of hype around him. I don't want to say being a better player than his brother. That's at this point, that's going to be a hard mountain to climb.
Mm-hmm.
But having that comparable, because the relation's there, so there's automatically going to be that sort of where you're going to be compared to your brother probably forever, just the way it is. I mean, look at the Nylanders. I mean, Alex, he's a good player, but can't really hold a candle to what William's been able to do over the course of his career so far.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's something to unlock that. Maybe Nick Robertson can find something that is more toward what his brother has done with Dallas. Again, I'm not saying he's going to reach that height, that level, but give him the opportunity to prove that he is his brother and has the same sort of mentality, has the same sort of gene pool. There's something that could be had there, and it is again, nothing against Joe O'Connor, but an improvement offensively, no doubt.
Yeah, and here, this is not a apples to apples comparison, but Nick Robertson's 22 years old. Even if you trade, draft picks for him, guess who came into the league at 22 years old? Jake Gensel. It's been a pretty good 8 years since Gensel joined the league at 22. So you're adding a Nick Robertson. That's what you have. That's the potential you have is not a 40-goal scorer in Jake Gensel, but a potential top 6 guy for the next decade. Because if the Penguins were in a better situation, Gensel would have been re-signed. The Penguins weren't in a good situation. They traded Gensel. They're trying to get back to that type of situation. A guy like Nick Robertson could certainly help them get there. So